We play and call it work.
Hey everybody, Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and this is an introductory video for the Apothis Crusade, our new and exciting next phase of our grand MiniWargaming cinematic universe, if you want to call it that, MWGCU, because MCU is unfortunately already taken somehow. The Apothis Crusade is a quasi-narrative campaign that is much like Warzone Apothis was almost 3 years ago. Warzone Apothis allowed guests to come in and affect the outcome of a grand-scale campaign that we did over the course of a summer. This is going to operate a little different, but the idea is still the same. If you've been watching Death Watch Apothis, the story there is actually setting up what is going on for the Apothis Crusade. So essentially what's going to happen is we have our regular narrative campaigns for 40K on Wednesdays, like Death Watch Apothis and other ones that are coming up, like the next one, which will be a Harlequin-based one. But we're also going to be switching it so that a lot of our regular Warhammer 40K battle reports are more narrative-driven. They'll still be match play, or maybe open play, or narrative play, but they'll each have a story and a reason why they are fighting. And so when we have a content producer fight off against a guest, they actually will shape the story based on the story they choose, the location they choose, and the outcome of the game. Each one won't necessarily have a huge, significant change, but all of them added together will shape exactly how the MiniWargaming cinematic universe will develop. So the first stage is going to start small, and then we're going to develop it in phases as more of our narrative campaigns go out, and our Dark Heresy role-playing game show, which will be starting on Thursday, March 1st. These things will open up to larger parts of the universe. The Apothis Crusade is based just in one system, the Apothis system, which is actually part of Warzone Apothis from almost 3 years ago. And it wraps in elements from other narrative campaigns as well. And so what happens here is when a guest comes in, the content producer and the guest decide which planet or place they're going to be fighting on, and which forces they're fighting for. There's going to be a restriction on what armies we're going to see in this, whereas Warzone Apothis allowed you to play any force and kind of pick a side. This one is going to be restricted to just the forces that are really prominently there, and then as we widen it in the later phases, we'll be introducing more forces. But you'll still be able to play with a lot of what's available. The main forces in the Apothis system are the Necrons, the Imperium. There's a huge fleet that's led by the Admech, but really there's Imperial Guard and Space Marines and pretty much everything else there, except maybe things like Grey Knights or very specialist things like that. But even the Sisters of Silence could be there. Inquisition is definitely there and all of that. And the Orcs are there as well. Minor forces in the system include Chaos and Tyranids, so those can be played as well. What is not currently featured in the system are things like Tau, Eldar, Dark Eldar, and the Harlequins. Those will be introduced in later phases. So unfortunately, if you want to play any of those armies, you'll have to just play regular battle reports with us and not actually do part of the Apothis Crusade. The Apothis Crusade is the name of basically phase 1 of this grandiose idea that we are doing. So the planets or locations that you can fight in Apothis in the system are as follows. The first one is Apophis Prime. Now this is a desert world. It's a bit of a dead world. It used to be inhabited a long time ago, over 100 years ago, but it got pushed out of its orbit by the next planet. So this planet has dead civilizations. It allows you to play on terrain that's all desert. Currently there are no primary armies there, so anybody could play there and start to try to dominate that sector or that area. And so it's more just a side one. It's one of the minor ones, in fact. We'll get to the major ones as we move out. So I'm moving out from its sun outward. So this is the planet closest to the sun. Now the planet that displaced it was Ixia. If you watch Storms of Ixia, which is a narrative campaign we did a long time ago, or Warzone Apothis, you will be familiar with Ixia. Ixia was a forest planet that was locked inside of basically a warp rift, surrounded by warp storms, a bit of a Bermuda Triangle of sorts. And Storms of Ixia had Tyranids, Orcs, and Imperial Guard that were all on there. And in Warzone Apothis, Ixia actually had those warp storms come kind of part a bit, and it was partially in the warp, so it dropped out of the warp. And this was all part of a grand chaos ritual that was supposed to happen that got frustrated in Warzone Apothis, so that was shut down. But Ixia came out, displaced Apophis Prime, which caused it to become a desert world when it got closer to the sun. And it is still there, and it is still infested with Tyranids. There are some orcs, there's lots of chaos, so it's currently hotly contested by a lot of different factions. The Necrons don't care too much about it, except to exterminate the ones that are really bothering them. Next up is the main planet and the center of most of the story of Deathwatch Apophis and the Apothis Crusade. It is Vadarak. Vadarak is, or was, or is, a Forge world that is also a Tomb world, and it was fought over hotly in Wars on Apophis. The Vadarakians, the Admech, have come back 100 years later after Wars on Apophis time, and that is why it's called the Apothis Crusade, because it is their crusade to retake their Forge world. If you've watched Deathwatch Apophis or are currently watching it, then you know some of the story about this. I don't want to give too much away in case you haven't, but I strongly suggest that you go over and watch Deathwatch Apophis if you want to really keep up on all the story of what is going on. Essentially, in Wars on Apophis, the Necrons beat back the Admech, and the Admech were forced to leave and take what little they could and take off. And so the Necron Tomb world has grown a lot, so a lot of the Forge world elements have been overrun with the emerging Tomb world over the past 100 years. The Tomb world itself even saw a civil war. It was being controlled by Khnum from some of our other narrative campaigns, but he's been kicked out and he's lost a lot of power. And it is back to the Satek dynasty. That is Imhotep the Stormlord's dynasty. So Imhotep himself is not there. This is just one of the many planets, but it is his world currently. And so that is hotly contested by the Necrons and the Imperium, the Admech fleet and the Imperial fleet that is there. But there are still some Tyranids in there, and now the Orcs are showing up as well. Which leads us to the remnants of Dusol. In the Wars on Apophis, there was a hive world called Dusol, which was thriving with billions and billions of inhabitants. It provided a lot of the forces of the sector. So the Forge world and the hive world made this system very, very valuable. But the Necrons got a hold of a doomsday device and they blew up the planet. Like, it exploded. But unlike when a Death Star blows it up, it explodes in big chunks. So now there's a huge asteroid belt with large chunks floating through it that are the remnants of Dusol. And the really interesting part, and this is the last planet or planetoid, is within that asteroid, there is actually a hive city planetoid. Dusol Primus was one of the hive cities, and when the planet exploded, it actually mostly remained intact. Now, obviously, with the earthquakes and the explosion would have killed most people, and it would have shaken it up and destroyed a lot of it, but the overall superstructure remained intact, and so that is floating around. Now, on the outside, there's no atmosphere, but you go deep enough inside, and there are actual things going on inside of there. Right now, we know there are orcs and Tyranids that are still fighting. If you watch Deathwatch Apophis, I don't want to give too many details away, but there's other stuff in there as well that can be fought over. So the Imperium can go in there, orcs can fight there. The Necrons would have variable interest in that area as well, not so much for technology, but just to exterminate the pests that are there. So these are the battlegrounds that you can fight on when you come into play against us for the next few weeks. So if you're already booked to do a battle report with us, then if you're bringing one of the armies that can be featured in this, then you can, when you come in, you can actually choose to do this. Or in the future, we're going to be continuing this as it widens and includes more systems and the story gets more epic and just more awesomer. And we're really trying to work hard. All the narrative campaigns that I've created over the past few years are technically part of the MiniWarGaming cinematic universe, but they mostly kind of exist outside of each other. They don't interact a lot with each other, except maybe mentioning some names here or there, or maybe being a sequel to one of the previous ones. Whereas the narrative campaigns and battle reports, Dark Heresy role-playing game, all that kind of stuff over the next year, our plan is to have them much more closely related, where you're going to see them be either a continuation or really lead into the other ones, kind of like, with the inspiration for this, of course, watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe over the past few years and just wanting to do something of that scale, where you see some of their movies are huge, like the Avengers movies, and other ones are smaller, like Spider-Man Homecoming. It's just a tale of a local guy with his superpowers and fighting a villain that's not really big enough for the Avengers to come take care of, but is a big enough threat that Spider-Man has a fun story to tell with them. So you're going to see kind of the same thing with this. So you're going to have the epic apocalyptic size games all the way down to the Deathwatch narrative campaigns or the Harlequin narrative campaign, which will be following a smaller group of people, or the Dark Heresy role-playing game, which will follow a very small number of people, but that'll have a lead-in to larger stories, and we can see returning characters and overlapping storylines. So it's an ambitious project that I've been undertaking for these past little while, and I really hope that you will enjoy it, and that you will be able to either come in and participate if you want to. I know very few people overall will be able to participate compared to how many viewers we have, but if you are interested, go to MiniWarGaming.com/challenge to find out details of how to issue a challenge. And even though we'll probably be done the first phase within the next couple of months, you can still come in and we should hopefully still be doing this kind of thing as we go to the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. It opens up and introduces new forces, new stories, new enemies, new heroes, new characters, and all sorts of other fun stuff. So that is the Apothis Crusade. You can look forward to start seeing battle reports for this probably in about 2 weeks, because we're going to start filming them now, and which means that they're with the current schedule. It'll basically be when Deathwatch Apophis has its finale, which if you're watching this when I put this video out on the Friday, February something or other, basically it's the week before the March goes. I don't know, I think it's this 22nd to the 23rd, whatever. Then Deathwatch Apophis has 2 more weeks to go before it hits its finale, and then the Apothis Crusade starts off of that. So that's kickstarting the whole thing. Thank you so much for your support, and thanks for all that you do, especially if you're a Vault member. You're really helping us to support all this by just being a Vault member. And if you are not a Vault member, I strongly suggest that you try it out, because that is what funds and allows us to do these things. And also you'll get twice as much content, because for every Apophis battle report we put out, there will be another one in the Vault. Our narrative campaigns, there will be a free component to them, and there will always be a Vault component. So if you want to enjoy the full amount of our content, then you need to be a Vault member. Go to MiniWarGaming.com/Vault trial, or just use the link below to go there right now to try it out for 7 days for free. And hopefully you'll support us in all this, because we need Vault members in order to grow and be able to do content just like what you're seeing. Thanks so much for watching. Happy wargaming.